Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her grip on the M249 squad automatic weapon, feeling the familiar weight settle against her shoulder. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training range at Camp Pendleton, where the sound of gunfire echoed like thunder across the California hills. Around her, Marines from different units prepared their weapons for the upcoming deployment to Afghanistan. But Maria could feel their eyes on her, and she knew exactly what they were thinking. "Think she can handle that beast?" she heard Corporal Jenkins whisper to his buddy behind her. The M249 weighed nearly 17 pounds unloaded, and with a full belt of ammunition, it became a 25-pound monster that could chew through enemy positions like a hungry animal. Most Marines assumed that someone Maria's size, 5'4" and barely 130 pounds, would struggle with such a weapon. Maria had heard it all before. During her 8 years in the Corps, she had faced countless doubts about her abilities. When she first arrived at Marine combat training, her drill instructors questioned whether she belonged in a combat role. When she volunteered for deployment to Iraq 3 years earlier, her platoon sergeant suggested she might be better suited for administration work. And when she requested to become the squad's automatic rifleman 6 months ago, half her unit laughed outright. But Maria Santos had something that couldn't be measured in pounds or inches. She had precision, dedication, and an iron will that had been forged in the tough neighborhoods of East Los Angeles. Growing up as the daughter of a Mexican immigrant father and a Salvadoran mother, she learned early that respect wasn't given. It was earned through hard work and determination. The rangemaster's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling the Marines to their firing positions. Maria moved to lane 12, setting up her M249 with practiced efficiency. She had spent countless hours studying the weapon system, learning every bolt and spring, memorizing every procedure until she could disassemble and reassemble the gun blindfolded. While other Marines complained about cleaning duties, Maria volunteered for extra time with the armorer, absorbing knowledge about ballistics, ammunition types, and optimal firing techniques. Lieutenant Morrison, the platoon commander, walked down the firing line with his clipboard, observing each Marine's setup. When he reached Maria's position, he paused longer than usual, his eyes scanning her equipment with obvious skepticism. Morrison was the academy graduate who had never seen combat, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed rank automatically meant wisdom. "Santos, you sure about that weapon selection?" Morrison asked, his voice carrying just enough doubt to make it clear he expected her to fail. "The M249 requires significant upper body strength for sustained fire. Maybe you should consider switching to an M4 carbine." Maria looked up at her lieutenant, keeping her expression neutral despite the frustration building in her chest. "Sir, I've qualified expert with this weapon system for 3 consecutive years. My sustained fire accuracy scores are in the top 5% of the battalion." Morrison's eyebrows raised slightly, as if surprised that she would dare question his suggestion. "Qualifying on a range is different from combat conditions, Staff Sergeant. In a real firefight, you'll be carrying this weapon for miles, firing from awkward positions, dealing with stress and fatigue." "Yes, sir, I understand that." Maria's voice remained respectful but firm. "That's why I've been training with full combat load for the past 6 months. I can carry this weapon and 800 rounds of ammunition for 12 miles without degrading my marksmanship standards." Several Marines nearby had stopped their preparations to listen to the exchange. Maria could see some nodding approval, while others still looked skeptical. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, a veteran of 2 deployments who served as the squad leader, stepped closer to the conversation. "Lieutenant, Santos knows her business," Rodriguez said quietly. "I've seen her work. She's solid." Morrison's jaw tightened slightly. As a junior officer, he didn't appreciate being contradicted by enlisted personnel, even experienced ones. "We'll see about that. Range is hot. Commence firing." The next hour became Maria's chance to demonstrate her skills. The M249 roared to life in her hands, sending precise bursts of ammunition downrange toward targets positioned at various distances. While other Marines struggled with their heavier weapons, fighting to control muzzle climb and dealing with jamming malfunctions, Maria's shots found their mark with mechanical precision. She had learned to use the weapon's weight to her advantage rather than fighting against it. Instead of trying to muscle the gun into position, she used proper body mechanics and shooting fundamentals. Her breathing remained controlled, her trigger finger moved with careful deliberation, and her spotting scope confirmed that each burst struck exactly where she intended. During the rapid-fire portion of the exercise, where Marines had to engage multiple targets under time pressure, Maria's performance became impossible to ignore. While others sent wild bursts that scattered bullets across the target area, her short, controlled bursts eliminated each silhouette with surgical precision. The electronic scoring system confirmed what everyone could see. She was outperforming Marines who outweighed her by 70 pounds. Corporal Jenkins, the same Marine who had questioned her abilities an hour earlier, found himself watching in amazement. "Holy shit!" he whispered to his partner. "Look at her go!" The advanced marksmanship course pushed the Marines even further. They had to engage targets while wearing full combat gear, fire from behind cover, and deal with simulated equipment malfunctions. The exercise was designed to test not just shooting skills, but the ability to maintain performance under stress and physical fatigue. Maria excelled in every scenario. When her weapon experienced a feeding malfunction during rapid fire, she cleared the jam in seconds and resumed firing without missing a beat. When the range master called for immediate action drills, she responded faster than Marines who had been using automatic weapons for years. Her muscle memory was so thoroughly developed that her hands seemed to move independently of conscious thought. But it was during the final exercise that Maria truly impressed her skeptics. The Marines had to carry their weapons and full combat load up a steep hill, then immediately engage targets at long range while their bodies were still dealing with oxygen debt and elevated heart rates. Most Marines struggled to maintain accuracy after the physical exertion, their shots scattering wide as they fought to control their breathing and steady their positions. Maria reached the firing position among the first Marines, despite carrying one of the heaviest weapon systems. Her breathing was elevated but controlled, and she took only 30 seconds to establish a stable shooting position. When the targets appeared, she engaged them with the same precision she had demonstrated on flat ground, her bullets striking center mass on silhouettes positioned 400 meters away. Lieutenant Morrison watched the exercise with growing surprise. His preconceptions about Maria's capabilities were being systematically demolished by her performance. She wasn't just adequate with the M249, she was exceptional. Her technical knowledge, physical conditioning, and marksmanship skills combined to create a level of competence that few Marines achieved with any weapon system. After the range session ended, Marines gathered their equipment and began the process of cleaning weapons and accounting for ammunition. Maria worked methodically through her post-exercise procedures, breaking down the M249 for cleaning and inspection. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, field stripping the weapon and examining each component for wear or damage. Sergeant Rodriguez approached her cleaning station, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the range office. He handed one to Maria and sat down on a nearby ammunition crate, his expression thoughtful. "You know they're going to keep testing you," Rodriguez said quietly. "Some people see a female Marine with an automatic weapon, and they automatically assume something's wrong with that picture." Maria looked up from her cleaning oil-stained cloth in her hands. "Let them test me. I didn't join the Corps to make friends or prove I belong. I joined to serve my country and protect my fellow Marines." Rodriguez nodded slowly. He had served with dozens of Marines over his 10-year career, and he had learned to recognize the difference between those who talked tough and those who actually were tough. Maria Santos fell clearly into the second category. Deployments coming up in 6 weeks, Rodriguez continued. Afghanistan's no joke. The Taliban know how to fight, and they're not going to care about your range scores when the bullets start flying. I'm ready for whatever comes, Maria replied, her voice carrying quiet confidence. This weapon and I are going to take care of business. As the afternoon wore on, word of Maria's performance spread through the unit. Marines who had initially dismissed her began asking technical questions about the M249, wanting to understand how she achieved such consistent accuracy. She answered their questions with patience and professionalism, sharing techniques she had developed through years of dedicated practice. Corporal Jenkins, now considerably more respectful, approached her with genuine curiosity. "Staff Sergeant, how do you manage the recoil so well? I've been fighting this thing all day." Maria demonstrated proper body position and grip technique, explaining how small adjustments in stance could dramatically improve control. "The weapon wants to climb and drift right," she explained. "You have to work with it, not against it. Think of it like dancing with a partner instead of wrestling with an opponent." Her willingness to share knowledge, combined with her demonstrated competence, began to change the dynamics within the unit. Marines who had initially seen her as a liability began to view her as a valuable asset. Her technical expertise, combined with her calm professionalism, marked her as someone who could be trusted in high-stress situations. Lieutenant Morrison observed these interactions with growing respect. His initial doubts about Maria's capabilities had been based on assumptions rather than evidence, and her performance had forced him to reevaluate his thinking. As the unit's leader, he needed Marines who could perform under pressure, and Maria had clearly demonstrated that ability. The final weeks before deployment passed quickly, filled with additional training exercises and equipment preparation. Maria continued to excel in every scenario, from urban warfare simulations to desert operations. Her confidence with the M249 grew even stronger, and other Marines began to rely on her expertise for questions about automatic weapons employment and maintenance. During a nighttime training exercise in the Mojave Desert, Maria's unit conducted a simulated patrol in conditions that closely resembled what they would face in Afghanistan. The desert air was cold and sharp, visibility was limited, and the Marines had to navigate difficult terrain while maintaining tactical discipline. When the unit received contact from simulated enemy forces, Maria immediately established a base of fire that allowed her teammates to maneuver against the threat. Her night vision equipment combined with her marksmanship skills to create a lethal combination, and the exercise controllers noted that her effective fire significantly contributed to the mission's success. After the exercise, as the Marines sat around their patrol base sharing rations and hot coffee, Corporal Jenkins made an observation that reflected the changing attitudes within the unit. "You know what?" Jenkins said, looking directly at Maria. "I'm glad you're carrying that 249. When things get ugly over there, I want someone with your skills laying down cover fire." Other Marines nodded in agreement, their respect evident in their expressions. Maria had earned their confidence not through politics or favoritism, but through demonstrated competence and professional excellence. She had proven that size and gender were less important than skill, dedication, and mental toughness. The final equipment inspection took place 3 days before the unit's departure for Afghanistan. Each Marine's gear was examined in detail, with particular attention paid to weapons maintenance and ammunition accountability. Maria's M249 passed inspection with flying colors, every component clean and properly lubricated, every accessory properly secured and ready for combat operations. As the inspection concluded, Lieutenant Morrison pulled Maria aside for a private conversation. His earlier skepticism had been replaced by genuine respect, and he wanted to acknowledge the change in his thinking. "Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology," Morrison said quietly. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on factors that had nothing to do with your actual skills. That was unprofessional and unfair." Maria nodded, accepting the apology with characteristic grace. "Sir, we all have preconceptions. What matters is being willing to change our thinking when evidence contradicts our assumptions." Morrison smiled slightly, recognizing wisdom that went beyond military matters. "I'm confident in your abilities now. When we get to Afghanistan, I know I can count on you to perform your duties with excellence." "Yes, sir. You can count on that." The conversation marked a turning point in Maria's relationship with her leadership and her fellow Marines. She had transformed from someone who was viewed with skepticism to someone who was seen as a crucial member of the team. Her weapon proficiency was no longer questioned, and her tactical knowledge was actively sought by others. But Maria knew that the real test was still ahead. Training exercises and range qualification were important, but combat was an entirely different challenge. In Afghanistan, there would be no safety officers, no controlled conditions, and no second chances for poor performance. The Taliban would test her skills in ways that no training scenario could perfectly replicate. As the unit made final preparations for deployment, Maria spent extra time with her weapon, conducting function checks and zeroing her optics. She reviewed tactical procedures and studied intelligence reports about the area where they would be operating. Every detail mattered. Every preparation could mean the difference between success and failure when the shooting started. The night before departure, Maria sat alone in her barracks room, cleaning her weapon one final time. The M249 had become more than just a tool. It was her partner, her responsibility, and her means of protecting the Marines who served alongside her. Tomorrow, they would begin a journey that would test everything she had learned and everything she believed about herself. Outside her window, she could hear other Marines making their own final preparations, checking equipment and saying goodbye to loved ones. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden. In a few weeks, she would be in Afghanistan, facing an enemy who had been fighting for decades and who knew the terrain like their own backyard. But Maria Santos was ready. She had spent years preparing for this moment, training her body and mind for the challenges ahead. Her weapon was ready, her skills were sharp, and her determination was unshakable. Whatever Afghanistan brought, she would be prepared to meet it with professional excellence and unwavering courage. The transport plane's engines roared through the thin air above Afghanistan as Maria Santos checked her equipment for the dozenth time. The C-130. Hercules carried 24 Marines toward Forward Operating Base Chapman, their new home for the next 7 months. Through the small porthole window, she could see the rugged mountains of the Hindu Kush, stretching endlessly in every direction, their peaks covered in snow that gleamed like knives in the morning sun. The flight had been long and uncomfortable, with Marines packed shoulder to shoulder in the cargo bay surrounded by their gear and supplies. Maria's M249 was secured in a weapons rack along with the other squad automatic weapons, but she kept her cleaning kit and spare parts close at hand. In Afghanistan, weapon maintenance wasn't just important. It was a matter of life and death. Sergeant Rodriguez moved through the aircraft, conducting a final briefing over the engine noise. "Listen up, Marines. Chapman is in Coast Province, right on the Pakistan border. The Taliban cross back and forth like they own the place, and they've been hitting our convoys and patrols pretty regularly. This isn't training anymore. Every time we leave the wire, we're fair game." The Marines listened intently, their earlier jokes and casual banter replaced by focused attention. They had all heard stories about Afghanistan, but none of them had experienced combat before. The reality of their situation was beginning to sink in as the aircraft descended toward their destination. Lieutenant Morrison sat across from Maria, his face pale beneath his desert camouflage. Despite his earlier confidence during training, the approaching reality of combat leadership was clearly weighing on him. Maria caught his eye and nodded reassuringly, a small gesture that acknowledged their shared responsibility for the Marines around them. Forward operating base. Chapman appeared below them as a collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and defensive positions carved into the mountainous terrain. The landing strip looked impossibly short from the air, surrounded by rocky hills that could hide enemy fighters. Guard towers equipped with machine guns and searchlights marked the perimeter, where Marines maintained constant watch for threats. The aircraft touched down with a hard thump that rattled equipment and passengers alike. As the rear cargo door opened, hot, dusty air swept through the cabin carrying the scent of diesel fuel, burning trash, and something indefinably foreign. The Marines quickly unloaded their gear and formed up for transport to their assigned quarters. Chapman was larger than Maria had expected, housing nearly 800 American and Afghan personnel in a complex of reinforced buildings and defensive positions. Concrete blast walls channeled movement through controlled checkpoints, while overhead protection guarded against mortar attacks. The base hummed with constant activity as vehicles moved supplies, aircraft arrived and departed, and soldiers from various units conducted their daily missions. The Marines were assigned to a hardened barracks building that would serve as their home for the deployment. Maria claimed a bottom bunk near the building's entrance, a position that would allow her to quickly access her gear if the base came under attack. She arranged her equipment with military precision, keeping her weapon cleaning supplies, spare parts, and ammunition readily accessible. Their first briefing came from Colonel Harrison, the base commander, a combat veteran who had served 3 previous deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. His weathered face and direct manner immediately commanded respect from the assembled Marines. "Gentlemen and ladies, welcome to the gateway to hell," Harrison began without preamble. "The enemy in this area is experienced, well-armed, and highly motivated. They know this terrain better than we do, and they've been fighting foreign armies for longer than most of you have been alive. Your mission is to disrupt their operations, protect our supply routes, and support the Afghan National Army in establishing security." The colonel's words were sobering but not discouraging. He outlined the threats they would face: improvised explosive devices hidden along roadways, sniper attacks from distant mountainsides, rocket and mortar bombardments of the base, and complex ambushes designed to inflict maximum casualties on coalition forces. "Your training has prepared you for this," Harrison continued. "Trust your equipment, trust your teammates, and follow your standard operating procedures. The Marines who came before you established a reputation for excellence in this area. I expect you to maintain that standard." After the briefing, Maria spent the remainder of the day familiarizing herself with the base layout and conducting final checks on her equipment. She visited the armory to verify spare parts availability, walked the defensive positions to understand fields of fire, and studied maps of the surrounding terrain. Knowledge and preparation were weapons just as important as the M249 she carried. Her first patrol came 3 days after arrival. The mission was relatively simple: escort a supply convoy to a small outpost 20 kilometers south of Chapman, then return the same route. Intelligence reports suggested minimal enemy activity in the area, making it an ideal introduction to combat operations for the new Marines. The convoy consisted of 4 armored vehicles carrying supplies and personnel. Maria rode in the second truck, her M249 positioned to cover the right side of the route. The weight of the weapon felt familiar in her hands. But the context was entirely different from training exercises. Here, every shadow could conceal an enemy fighter. Every pile of rocks might hide an explosive device. The landscape was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Rocky mountains rose like fortress walls on both sides of the narrow road, while deep valleys offered concealment for anyone wanting to watch their movement. The terrain favored defenders, providing countless positions for ambushes while limiting the convoy's options for maneuvering. Corporal Jenkins rode in the same vehicle, serving as Maria's assistant gunner and ammunition bearer. His earlier skepticism about her abilities had been completely replaced by confidence in her skills, and he watched their assigned sector with sharp attention to detail. "First time out here?" Jenkins asked quietly as they bounced along the rough road. "First time anywhere," Maria replied, her eyes scanning the ridgelines for signs of movement. "But we're ready for whatever comes." The convoy reached the outpost without incident, delivered their supplies, and began the return journey to Chapman. But intelligence reports had been wrong about enemy activity in the area. Taliban fighters had been tracking their movement, waiting for the right moment to strike. The ambush came at a bend in the road where the terrain forced the convoy into a narrow valley with steep walls on both sides. The first indication of trouble was a massive explosion that erupted under the lead vehicle, sending smoke and debris high into the air. Immediately afterward, automatic weapons fire poured down from concealed positions on the surrounding ridges. Maria's training took over instantly. The theoretical knowledge from months of preparation became real-world action as she identified enemy muzzle flashes and began returning fire with her M249. The weapon roared to life in her hands, sending precise bursts toward targets that appeared and disappeared among the rocks above. "Contact left! Contact right!" Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos over the radio. "All vehicles, establish a base of fire and prepare to bound by teams." The enemy fire was intense and well-coordinated, coming from at least 6 different positions that had been carefully selected to create overlapping fields of fire. Bullets struck the armored vehicles with metallic clangs, while others kicked up small geysers of dust and stone from the road surface. Maria's M249 spoke with mechanical precision, its distinctive sound adding to the crescendo of gunfire that echoed through the valley. She could see enemy fighters moving among the rocks, trying to improve their positions or coordinate their attacks. Her response was immediate and accurate, forcing them to take cover and disrupting their planned assault. Jenkins fed ammunition belts into the weapon while calling out target locations. 200 meters behind the large boulder," he shouted over the noise. "Moving left to right." Maria shifted her fire to the indicated position, her bullets striking sparks off the rock where an enemy fighter had taken cover. The Taliban militant's rifle fell silent, whether from casualties or discretion, but either result was acceptable from Maria's perspective. The engagement lasted 15 minutes, but felt like hours. By the time the enemy fighters began withdrawing from their positions, Maria had expended nearly 400 rounds of ammunition and engaged at least 8 different targets. Her weapon had performed flawlessly, never jamming despite the sustained rate of fire and dusty conditions. As the convoy continued its journey back to Chapman, Rodriguez came over the radio with a simple message. "Outstanding work, Santos. That's how it's done." Lieutenant Morrison, who had coordinated the response from his vehicle's command position, was equally impressed. Maria's performance under fire had been exactly what he hoped for, but hadn't been certain to expect. She had remained calm, accurate, and effective throughout the engagement. Back at Chapman, the Marines conducted their after-action review while the adrenaline was still fresh in their systems. Maria's weapon maintenance became a priority, as the sustained firing had left carbon buildup and other residue that needed immediate attention. She worked methodically through the cleaning process, examining each component for signs of wear or damage. Word of the engagement spread quickly through the base. Marines from other units stopped by to ask about the contact and offer their own observations about enemy tactics. Maria answered their questions with professional objectivity, neither minimizing nor exaggerating her role in the successful response. Over the following weeks, Maria's reputation grew with each patrol. The enemy in their area of operations was persistent and aggressive, launching attacks on convoys, attempting to infiltrate the base perimeter, and engaging patrols with sniper fire from long range. Each contact provided another opportunity for Maria to demonstrate her skills with the M249. During a night patrol in a village suspected of harboring Taliban fighters, Maria's squad was moving through narrow streets when they received fire from multiple buildings simultaneously. The enemy had prepared the ambush carefully, using the urban terrain to limit the Marines' movement options while maximizing their own protection. Maria immediately identified the primary threat, a machine gun position on a rooftop that could sweep the entire street with deadly fire. Her response was swift and decisive, engaging the position with sustained bursts that forced the enemy gunner to abandon his weapon and seek cover. "Suppressing rooftop position," she called out over the radio, continuing to place accurate fire on the building while her teammates maneuvered to safer positions. Her night vision equipment and weapon-mounted illumination devices allowed her to maintain accuracy despite the darkness. The engagement concluded when close air support arrived to destroy the enemy positions with precision-guided munitions. But Maria's quick thinking and accurate fire had prevented casualties among her fellow Marines, earning her growing respect from the entire unit. Corporal Jenkins, who had become her regular assistant gunner, began telling other Marines about her performance in combat. "She's like a machine," he would say, "cool, calm, and deadly accurate. I've never seen anyone handle that 249 like she does." Lieutenant Morrison's leadership style evolved as he gained combat experience, and he came to rely heavily on Maria's expertise and judgment. During mission planning sessions, he would specifically ask for her input on weapons employment and enemy capabilities, recognizing that her tactical knowledge was among the best in the unit. "Santos, what's your assessment of that ridge line?" Morrison would ask during patrol briefings, pointing to areas on the map where enemy contact was possible. Her answers were always thoughtful and detailed, based on her growing understanding of local terrain and enemy tactics. The Taliban fighters in their area began adapting their methods in response to Maria's effectiveness. Instead of engaging from fixed positions where her accurate fire could suppress them, they started using hit-and-run tactics, taking quick shots before disappearing into terrain that offered concealment. But Maria adapted as well. She began studying enemy patterns, learning to anticipate their likely positions and preferred escape routes. Her knowledge of ballistics allowed her to engage targets at longer ranges than most machine gunners attempted, extending her effective reach beyond what the enemy expected. During one patrol, the unit was crossing an open area when a sniper began engaging them from a ridgeline nearly 600 meters away. The enemy marksman was skilled and patient, taking careful shots at Marines who exposed themselves for more than a few seconds. The situation was dangerous because the terrain offered limited cover, and the enemy position was too distant for accurate return fire with rifles. Maria studied the ridgeline through her weapon's optics, looking for any sign of the sniper's location. She had to account for wind speed, elevation difference, and the ballistic characteristics of her ammunition at extended range. When she finally spotted a brief muzzle flash among the rocks, she responded with a series of precise bursts that bracketed the enemy position. The sniper fire stopped immediately. Whether Maria had scored a hit or simply forced the enemy marksman to relocate was impossible to determine, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. The patrol was able to continue its mission without taking casualties. After 4 months in Afghanistan, Maria had become one of the most respected machine gunners on the base. Her weapon skills were acknowledged by Marines from multiple units, and requests were made for her to participate in training sessions where she could share her expertise with others. But her reputation extended beyond just marksmanship. Maria had developed an understanding of enemy tactics and terrain that made her valuable for mission planning and intelligence analysis. She could read a map and predict where enemy fighters were likely to establish positions, knowledge that proved invaluable for avoiding ambushes and planning effective responses to contact. The war was changing her in ways that went beyond technical skills. The constant tension of combat operations, the responsibility for protecting her fellow Marines. And the reality of life and death decisions had matured her judgment and strengthened her confidence. She had proven herself in the crucible of combat, earning respect through performance rather than politics. Rodriguez, who had supported her from the beginning, observed her growth with professional satisfaction. "You've become exactly what this unit needed," he told her after a particularly challenging patrol. "The other Marines look to you for leadership, and you've earned that respect." Maria's response was typically modest. "We're all just doing our jobs, Sergeant, taking care of each other and completing the mission." But privately, she felt the satisfaction of achievement. The doubts and skepticism she had faced during training were distant memories now, replaced by the confidence that came from proven competence. Her relationship with the M249 had evolved from technical proficiency to tactical mastery. The weapon had become an extension of her will, responding to her intentions with mechanical precision. She knew its capabilities and limitations intimately, understanding exactly what she could ask of it in any given situation. More importantly, she had learned to use it as part of a larger tactical system, coordinating her fires with other weapons and supporting the maneuver of her fellow Marines. As the deployment entered its final months, the tempo of operations increased. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were planning a major offensive designed to inflict significant casualties on coalition forces before winter weather limited their operations. The Taliban wanted to demonstrate their continuing strength and resolve to the local population. Maria and her unit prepared for the coming challenges by conducting additional training and rehearsals. They practiced immediate action drills, coordination with supporting arms, and medical evacuation procedures. Every detail was reviewed and refined because they knew that when the enemy chose to make their move, the margin for error would be extremely small. The base's intelligence officer, Captain Williams, briefed the Marines on the current threat situation during one of their regular intelligence updates. "We're seeing increased enemy movement in the surrounding valleys," Williams reported. "Communications intercepts suggest they're planning something significant for the near future." Maria listened to the briefing with professional interest. After months of combat experience, she had developed an intuitive understanding of enemy behavior patterns. The increase in activity that Williams described was consistent with preparations for a major attack, probably involving multiple enemy units working in coordination. That night, as she conducted her routine weapon maintenance, Maria felt a sense of anticipation mixed with professional readiness. The Taliban were planning something, and when it came, she would be ready to meet it with everything she had learned during her months of combat experience. The M249 sat disassembled on her cleaning mat, each component carefully inspected and lubricated. Tomorrow, she would reassemble it and prepare for another day of patrols and potential contact. But something felt different about the current situation, as if the enemy was building toward something larger than the routine engagements they had been fighting. Whatever was coming, Maria Santos was prepared to face it with the weapon that had become her partner in the deadly business of modern warfare. The pre-dawn darkness of October 15th brought an unusual quiet to Forward Operating Base Chapman. Maria Santos had awakened early, as had become her habit during combat deployments, and was conducting final checks on her M249 when the base's warning sirens began their haunting wail. The attack everyone had been anticipating was finally beginning. Intelligence had been tracking increased enemy communications and movement for 3 days, but the timing and location of their planned assault had remained unclear. The Taliban had learned to avoid patterns that coalition forces could predict, varying their methods and targets to maintain the element of surprise. Rodriguez's voice cut through the darkness over the barracks intercom system. "All Marines, full battle rattle, weapons and ammunition. Report to the staging area in 10 minutes. This is not a drill." Maria moved with practiced efficiency, donning her body armor and gathering her combat load of ammunition. The M249 felt familiar in her hands as she conducted function checks and verified that her night vision equipment was operating properly. Around her, other Marines were making their own preparations with the calm professionalism that came from months of combat experience. The staging area buzzed with controlled activity as platoons assembled and received their mission briefing. Captain Williams, the intelligence officer, stood before a large map board illuminated by tactical lights that cast stark shadows across his face. "Marines, we have a situation developing at Outpost Bravo," Williams began, his voice carrying the urgency of real-world crisis. "The Taliban have launched a coordinated attack against the position with an estimated 80 to 100 fighters. The outpost is under heavy assault from multiple directions, and their communications are intermittent. Outpost Bravo was a small forward position located 15 kilometers southeast of Chapman, established to monitor a critical valley that served as a major infiltration route from Pakistan. The outpost normally housed about 30 American personnel and 20 Afghan National Army soldiers, making it vulnerable to the kind of massed assault that intelligence was now reporting. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward to receive the mission details. His earlier nervousness had been replaced by focused determination as combat experience had seasoned his leadership abilities. "What's our role, sir?" "Your platoon will join a relief force moving to reinforce Bravo," Williams replied. "The convoy consists of 4 armored vehicles and will depart in 20 minutes. Speed is essential. The outpost is in danger of being overrun." Maria felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded combat operations, but her hands remained steady as she checked her ammunition count one final time. 800 rounds of linked 5.56mm ammunition, plus spare barrels in case sustained firing required weapon changes. Her medical kit was positioned for quick access, and her radio was tuned to the appropriate frequencies. The convoy formed up quickly in the pre-dawn darkness, engines running and weapons manned as Marines took their assigned positions. Maria rode in the second vehicle with Jenkins as her assistant gunner, their M249 positioned to provide supporting fire during the movement to Bravo. Rodriguez rode in the lead vehicle, coordinating with other elements of the relief force over tactical radio frequencies. The base's operations center was monitoring the situation at Bravo through satellite imagery and intercepted enemy communications, providing updates as the situation developed. "Bravo reports enemy forces attacking from the north and east simultaneously," Rodriguez announced over the vehicle's intercom system. "They're taking casualties and requesting immediate assistance." The convoy moved quickly through the darkness, their route illuminated by night vision equipment and vehicle-mounted infrared lights invisible to the naked eye. The familiar landscape looked different in the green-tinted display of Maria's night vision goggles, transformed into an alien moonscape of shadows and geometric shapes. As they approached the valley leading to Outpost Bravo, the sound of gunfire became audible even over the noise of their vehicle engines. Automatic weapons fire mixed with the distinctive crack of rifle shots and the deeper boom of explosions, creating a symphony of violence that echoed through the mountain passages. Lieutenant Morrison's voice came over the radio frequency, calm despite the circumstances. "All vehicles, be advised we have visual contact with muzzle flashes approximately 2 kilometers from Bravo. Enemy forces appear to be positioned on both sides of the valley." Maria adjusted her grip on the M249 and scanned the ridgelines through her weapon's optical sight. The tactical situation was becoming clear. The Taliban had established blocking positions to prevent reinforcement of the outpost, while their main assault force attacked the position itself. The first enemy contact came as the convoy entered the valley approach. Rocket-propelled grenades streaked down from concealed positions on the mountainsides, their bright trails visible against the dark sky. One missed the lead vehicle by mere meters, exploding against the rocky ground in a shower of sparks and debris. Maria immediately identified enemy muzzle flashes among the rocks above and began engaging with precise bursts from her M249. The weapon's distinctive sound joined the crescendo of gunfire as the convoy fought its way through the enemy blocking positions. "Contact left and right," Rodriguez called over the radio. "All vehicles, maintain movement toward Bravo. Do not allow the enemy to fix us in place." The Taliban fighters had chosen their positions well, using the terrain to create overlapping fields of fire that covered the road leading to the outpost. But they had not anticipated the intensity and accuracy of the Marine response, particularly from Maria's position in the second vehicle. Her fire was devastating against the enemy positions. The M249's sustained rate of fire allowed her to suppress multiple targets, while the convoy continued its movement, preventing the Taliban fighters from coordinating their attacks effectively. Tracer rounds marked her bullets' paths through the darkness, creating deadly streaks that reached out to touch enemy positions with mechanical precision. Jenkins fed ammunition belts into the weapon while calling out target locations and maintaining communication with other vehicles in the convoy. 300 meters, ridgeline right, 2 fighters behind the rock outcropping. Maria shifted her fire to the indicated position, her bullets striking sparks off the rocks where enemy muzzlers' flashes had been visible. The Taliban position fell silent, whether from casualties or the decision to seek better cover, but the immediate threat was neutralized. The convoy's movement toward Bravo continued under fire, with Marines in each vehicle engaging targets as they appeared. The enemy blocking force was substantial, probably numbering 30 to 40 fighters positioned to delay or destroy any reinforcement attempt. But the Marines had trained for exactly this type of situation. Their fire was coordinated and accurate, with each vehicle covering specific sectors while maintaining the movement necessary to reach their destination. Maria's M249 provided the sustained suppressive fire that allowed other weapons to engage point targets with precision. As they approached the final turn before Outpost Bravo, the full scope of the Taliban assault became visible. The outpost was under attack from 3 directions simultaneously, with enemy forces using mortars, machine guns, and rocket-propelled grenades to pound the defensive positions. The outpost's return fire was sporadic and clearly indicating that the defenders were being overwhelmed by the intensity of the assault. Several buildings showed damage from direct hits, and at least one of the perimeter guard towers appeared to have been destroyed completely. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio with urgent instructions. "All vehicles, Bravo is in immediate danger of being overrun. We need to establish a base of fire and break up the enemy assault before they breach the perimeter." The convoy deployed rapidly into fighting positions that allowed each vehicle to engage different sectors of the enemy assault force. Maria's position provided an excellent view of the northern approach to Bravo, where the largest concentration of Taliban fighters was attempting to breach the outpost's main defensive line. Through her weapon's optics, she could see enemy fighters moving among the rocks and debris that surrounded the outpost's perimeter. They were working systematically to destroy defensive positions and create gaps through which assault teams could penetrate the American positions. Maria's response was immediate and devastating. Her M249 reached out across the battlefield with surgical precision, engaging enemy fighters who thought they were safely concealed behind cover. The weapon's accuracy at extended range surprised Taliban militants, who had become accustomed to the shorter effective ranges of most coalition small arms. "Engaging enemy assault teams, northern perimeter," Maria announced over the radio as her weapon spoke with mechanical precision. Tracer rounds arced through the darkness, marking the path of her bullets as they found their targets among the enemy positions. The effect on the Taliban assault was dramatic. Enemy fighters who had been advancing confidently toward the outpost's perimeter suddenly found themselves under accurate fire from an unexpected direction. Their coordinated attack began to falter as leaders were eliminated and assault teams were forced to seek cover. Jenkins maintained a steady supply of ammunition while observing the battlefield through his own night vision equipment. "Holy shit, Santos! You're breaking up their entire assault!" The Taliban commanders quickly recognized the threat posed by Maria's position and began directing fire toward the convoy's location. Bullets struck the armored vehicle with metallic impacts, while rocket-propelled grenades exploded nearby, filling the air with dust and debris. But Maria continued her methodical engagement of enemy targets, her fire never wavering despite the incoming rounds. She had entered what infantry soldiers call the zone, a mental state where training, instinct, and tactical awareness combine to create performance that transcends normal human limitations. Her targets fell with mechanical regularity as the M249 reached out to touch Taliban fighters at ranges they had thought were safe. Enemy machine gun positions that had been suppressing the outpost's defenders suddenly fell silent as Maria's fire found their crews. Mortar teams attempting to set up for indirect fire found themselves under direct attack from her position. Lieutenant Morrison, coordinating the convoy's fires from his command vehicle, watched Maria's performance with amazement. Her shooting was unlike anything he had witnessed during training or previous combat operations. Every burst seemed to find its target, and her tactical instincts allowed her to prioritize threats with perfect judgment. "Santos is single-handedly breaking up their assault," Morrison reported to higher headquarters. "Her fire is devastating their northern attack force." The Taliban's assault plan had depended on overwhelming the outpost quickly before coalition reinforcements could arrive. Maria's accurate fire was disrupting their timeline and causing casualties among their assault teams faster than they could be replaced. Enemy commanders began attempting to coordinate a concentrated attack against Maria's position, recognizing that neutralizing her fire was essential to the success of their operation. But the convoy's other vehicles provided supporting fire that prevented the Taliban fighters from massing effectively against any single target. The battle raged for another 30 minutes as enemy assault teams attempted to penetrate Bravo's perimeter, while Maria and the relief force engaged them with devastating effect. Her M249 had become the focal point of the engagement, its sustained fire reaching out to touch targets throughout the battlefield. As dawn began to break over the mountains, the Taliban assault finally began to collapse. Their casualty rate had become unsustainable, and their inability to overwhelm the outpost quickly meant that additional coalition forces would soon arrive to reinforce the defenders. Maria had fired nearly 600 rounds during the engagement, her weapon performing flawlessly despite the sustained rate of fire and dusty conditions. Her barrel was hot enough to shimmer in the morning air, but the M249 had never faltered throughout the extended firefight. Enemy forces began withdrawing from their assault positions, carrying their wounded and abandoning equipment that had become too heavy for their retreat. The distinctive sound of gunfire gradually diminished as Taliban fighters melted back into the mountainous terrain that had concealed their approach. The convoy moved into Outpost Bravo to assess the situation and provide assistance to the defenders. The scene that greeted them was sobering. Several buildings had been damaged or destroyed by enemy fire, and multiple defensive positions showed signs of the intense fighting that had occurred. But the American and Afghan personnel were still in control of their position, and their casualty count was much lower than it might have been without the timely intervention of the relief force. The outpost's commander, Captain Rodriguez, met the convoy as they entered the perimeter. "Outstanding work out there," Rodriguez told Lieutenant Morrison as they surveyed the battlefield. "Your fire broke up their assault just when we needed it most." Morrison nodded toward Maria's position, where she was conducting function checks on her weapon after the extended engagement. "Staff Sergeant Santos deserves the credit. Her shooting was phenomenal." The aftermath of the engagement revealed the full scope of Maria's contribution to the battle's outcome. Intelligence personnel who examined the battlefield estimated that Taliban casualties numbered at least 40 fighters, with most of the losses occurring during their attempted assault on the outpost's northern perimeter. The enemy dead and wounded found in Maria's sector of fire confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Her marksmanship had been devastating and precise throughout the engagement. Taliban fighters had been eliminated at ranges exceeding 500 meters, demonstrating a level of accuracy that few machine gunners ever achieved in combat. Captain Williams, the intelligence officer, interviewed Maria about her observations during the engagement. Her detailed knowledge of enemy tactics and movement patterns provided valuable information about Taliban capabilities and organization in the local area. "How many enemy fighters do you estimate you engaged?" Williams asked during the debriefing session. Maria considered the question carefully before answering. "At least 15 confirmed targets, probably more that I couldn't observe due to terrain and lighting conditions. The enemy assault force was larger and better organized than anything we've faced previously." Williams nodded, making notes for his intelligence report. "Your fire was the decisive factor in repelling their assault. The defenders at Bravo estimate that you prevented them from being overrun by approximately 10 minutes. The mathematical implications were staggering. Outpost Bravo housed 50 American and Afghan personnel who would likely have been killed or captured if the Taliban assault had succeeded. Maria's accuracy with the M249 had quite literally saved 50 lives during a single engagement. Word of the engagement spread quickly through the coalition force structure in Afghanistan. Maria's performance became the subject of official reports that reached senior commanders throughout the theater of operations. Her technical mastery of the M249 system, combined with her tactical judgment under extreme stress, had prevented a significant tactical defeat, but Maria herself remained characteristically modest about her achievements. When congratulated by other Marines, she deflected credit to her training, her weapon, and the support provided by her fellow squad members. "The M249 did its job, and I did mine," she told Jenkins when he praised her shooting. "That's what we trained for." Rodriguez observed her reaction with professional admiration. Combat had a way of revealing character, and Maria's response to praise demonstrated the same professionalism she had shown throughout her military career. The official commendation process began immediately, with Lieutenant Morrison submitting paperwork recommending Maria for the Bronze Star Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device. The recommendation detailed her actions during the engagement and their tactical significance to the battle's outcome. Staff Sergeant Santos demonstrated exceptional valor and technical proficiency during a crucial combat engagement, Morrison wrote in his recommendation. Her accurate fire with the M249 squad automatic weapon was directly responsible for repelling a coordinated enemy assault and preventing significant coalition casualties. The medal approval process would take months to complete, but the recognition of Maria's performance was immediate and widespread. Marines from other units visited her position to examine her weapon and ask questions about her engagement techniques. Corporal Jenkins, who had served as her assistant gunner throughout the deployment, became something of a celebrity himself as the Marine who had supported Maria during her legendary performance. He fielded countless questions about the engagement, always emphasizing Maria's calm professionalism under fire. "She never got excited, never lost focus," Jenkins would tell other Marines. "Even with bullets flying and RPGs exploding around us, she just kept shooting with that same precision we saw on the training range back at Pendleton." The Taliban's failed assault marked the beginning of a significant decrease in enemy activity in the Chapman area of operations. Intelligence reports indicated that their casualties during the engagement had severely damaged the effectiveness of local Taliban units, forcing them to withdraw to Pakistan for reorganization and replacement of losses. Maria's reputation extended beyond her own unit to include Marines throughout the region. Requests came from other bases for her to conduct training sessions on advanced marksmanship techniques and M249 employment, recognition of her expertise that went far beyond normal expectations for a staff sergeant. The remaining months of the deployment passed with relatively minor contact as enemy forces avoided areas where they might encounter the level of resistance that had destroyed their assault on Outpost Bravo. Maria continued her professional duties with the same dedication she had always demonstrated, but her status within the Marine Corps had fundamentally changed. She was no longer the Marine who had to prove herself worthy of carrying the M249. Instead, she had become the standard against which other machine gunners measured their own performance. Her technical knowledge and combat experience made her a valuable resource for training and mission planning. As the deployment neared its conclusion, Colonel Harrison called Maria to his office for a personal conversation. The base commander wanted to discuss her future career plans and the opportunities that would be available to her after returning to the United States. "Staff Sergeant, your performance here has been exceptional," Harrison began. "I've received inquiries from several different units about your availability for transfer. The Marine Corps recognizes that you have unique talents that need to be properly utilized." Maria listened respectfully to the colonel's offer of advanced training opportunities and prestigious assignments, but her response reflected the same humility she had maintained throughout her career. "Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but I'm happy to serve wherever the Corps needs me most. My job is to train Marines and complete missions, regardless of location or assignment." Harrison smiled at her response, recognizing the character that had made her performance possible in the first place. "That attitude is exactly why you're so valuable, Santos. The Marines who serve with you are lucky to have someone with your skills and professionalism." The flight home from Afghanistan carried the same Marines who had arrived 8 months earlier, but their experiences had transformed them from trainees into combat veterans. Maria sat in the same cramped transport aircraft, her M249 secured in the weapons rack, reflecting on everything that had changed since their deployment began. The weapon that had once been the subject of skepticism and doubt had become her partner in one of the most significant engagements fought by coalition forces in their area of operations. Her mastery of its capabilities had quite literally meant the difference between victory and defeat in a battle that could have changed the strategic situation in the region. As the aircraft climbed away from Afghan airspace, Maria felt a sense of completion rather than relief. She had proven herself in the ultimate test of military proficiency, earning respect through performance rather than politics. The doubts that had once surrounded her abilities were now distant memories, replaced by recognition of genuine expertise. But more importantly, she had fulfilled her fundamental obligation as a Marine, protecting the lives of her fellow service members and completing the mission regardless of personal cost. 50 American and Afghan personnel were alive because of her actions during a single engagement, a responsibility that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The M249 that had caused so much initial skepticism had become the instrument of her vindication. Together, they had written a chapter in military history that would be studied by future generations of Marines, learning about courage, competence, and the importance of individual excellence in combat operations. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos returned home as a decorated combat veteran whose achievements had exceeded every expectation. She had proven that determination, training, and professional excellence could overcome any obstacle, including the prejudices that had initially questioned her fitness for combat duty. The Marine who had once been told she would struggle with the M249 had instead used it to save 50 lives in a single engagement, earning her place among the most respected machine gunners in Corps history.